was hoping that you could clear something up that I've never completely understood about your position, which I think the way to think about it is this, right? So the sort of usual story people tell about Hegelianism and about Marxism is that Hegel has this idealist theory of history. He thinks that, history is like the coming into itself of the world spirit. So there's these non-material factors that are driving everything forward. And then Marx sets Hegel, turns Hegel upside down, turns him upright, something like that, by retaining the structure of Hegel's ideas, but doing a materialist version of it. And I've heard you say things over the years like you want to set back, you want to turn Hegel around again, or you want to reverse that in some way, or you want to complicate that in some way. And I have to admit, I've never been entirely clear on how that position works. So if that's not, I understand I'm asking you a giant question. You've written, several books about this stuff, but if that's not too general, I was wondering if you could clarify what your position is on that.
I am grateful for this question, and sorry, you know that the only way I recognize somebody as a friend is to make a bad taste jokes or comparisons, comparing them with. So I love this question because you remind me of, sorry, I know you're not this, stupid Hollywood producers who I was told, I read in old books on Hollywood when I was young, a guy came to them with, I have a wonderful scenario, blah, blah, and they tell them, give me just a punchline, 2-3 sentences. I cannot grasp more, so you are asking me this basically.
Yeah. Give me the elevator pitch
for you Hollywood producer.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
Just long enough for an elevator ride. Give me that much of your view on this subject you spent all this book talking about.
Yeah. First, of course, Hegel's at least historical limits are clear, and I emphasize this. First, something happened in the 19th century. Not so much this vulgar materialism, science, and so on, but in sciences, a certain logic of, let's call it mechanic determinism, and I'm talking here even about purely scientific notions like, entropy or energy, how this idea of mechanized energy in the sense that it goes on just on pure mechanical repetition, all that stuff which characterize scientific materialism, and I'm not mocking it, it has its greatness. This was the science of the big science, natural science of the 19th century. Hegel was out of this. And as some guys, very intelligent readers of Marx, pointed out, even when Marx is problematic today, for example, in his so-called labor theory of value, as that I buy, but especially his, how should I call it, mechanicist reductionism, where Marx advocates the position that higher complex labor of an engineer or whatever is simply a multiplication of simple elementary level. At the low level elementary value of labor is measured by the time you spend on it. But okay, what if you get a highly educated guy who does the plan for your machine, blah, blah, blah? Obviously, at least in some naive sense, his work produces more, contributes more to the value. Marxist answer is this reduction in typical 19th century style. You know that you just have to multiply it. Let's say 1 hour of...
Marx says something in Capital like skilled labor is multiplied. It can be reduced to unskilled labor but he uses some strange phrase like by a well-known process that he never says what the well-known process is.
I'm written about it. You know, a great Marxist, maybe the greatest in economic matters today. Our friend, I hope I can say, David Harvey, no? I hope you took this remark from, because David Harvey does a wonderful, almost Freudian analysis here, because Marx uses the term, as you said, by a well-known process, it's obvious or what, and Harvey asks, sorry, in what sense well-known? Who did at any point not only develop this, but even mention it, you know? So this is typical empty rhetoric. You don't have good arguments, so you say, oh, it's well known, and so on. No? But I think the origin of this is Marx's reliance on the notion of energy, constant energy, which is, again, a typical product of post-Hegelian mechanical materialism. So, here, I don't mean this as a criticism of Marx. On the contrary, I think that this mechanic logic is inscribed into capitalism itself. This brings me to the second point, and I elaborate this paradox, I forgot in which one of my books where I deal with this Marx-Hegel topic, that the most intelligent, I found it elsewhere, it's not mine, argument for a moderate critique of Marx and Hegel is that the problem with Hegel is that because of, but maybe it's more, obvious social limitation of his time, Hegel was not Hegelian enough when dealing with capitalist production. Hegel, if you read him carefully, he differentiates between three Stände, estates. This allgemeine, universal state, state functionaries, and so on, then farmers, and in between commerce, laborers, and so on. But they are all one and the same big group. The idea of an immanent antagonism here is foreign to Hegel, which is why in all the dynamics that Hegel saw very well, Hegel, as we know, was reading Adam Smith and so on, all of them, even Ricardo, Hegel still conceives this civil society as the sphere of economy at the level of collaboration between individuals on the market. I produce something, you produce something else, we exchange it, okay, one gets richer than the other. But this crucial dialectical idea of working force itself becoming one of the commodities. Hegel should have seen this, because this is precisely the most dialectical moment of reflexivity, where, let us say, I will be fair towards you, I produce something, you produce something, but then you get wealthier, so that instead of buying things from me, because I screwed it up, now I'm giving you a standard bourgeois version, because of working well, blah, blah, I screwed it up with my laziness, you worked hardly, so you no longer buy things for me, you buy me, not as a slave, but my labor force, you know. And this is Marx's precise definition. Capitalism emerges when the source of value, labor, becomes another commodity on the market. This Hegel didn't see. And we go on. So that's a beautiful paradox. This, I think, I invented it, and I'm very little proud of it. That the problem of Hegel was that confronting capitalism at a very elementary stage, still, he wasn't Hegelian enough. What Marx did in Capital was Hegelianizing the critique of political economy. When Marx describes, that's the classical example, the passage from money as commodity to capital, he puts it in purely Hegelian terms of how substance becomes subject. Money, in its pre-capitalist mode, it's a neutral means of exchange. We use it to exchange, to satisfy the objects, to satisfy commodities, to satisfy our needs, and so on and so on. But what happens in capitalism is that capital becomes the active agent. The goal of the production is not satisfying our needs, not even rich people making them richer. It is simply the expanded self-reproduction of capital itself. And again, Marx literally describes this in Hegelian terms, which is why, as I don't agree with them, some new breed of scholars who deal with Marx and Hegel point out that early Marx still thought Hegel, blah, blah, idealist speculation, and so on. But the big breakthrough of Marx, who was, again, till, let's say, early 1950s, mostly mocking, making fun of Hegel as the, not stupid, but an idealist who is confusing things, blah, blah, that Marx then discovered, but my God, there is a domain which in our lowest, in the sense the most brutal material, reality, which behaves exactly in the way Hegelian spirit or Hegelian notion behaves, in the sense of self-movement, self-reproduction, self-sublation of, and this is the movement of capital. So that's the beauty of Marx. Then he went on, but his basic discovery is that capital is structured as a Hegelian notion. There is, even if you as a single capitalist or whatever are a vulgar materialist, you want only profit, pleasures, whatever, in your practice you are idealist, in the sense that economy in which you participate, collaborate, behaves in a Hegelian way. So this is my basic position. I'm not simply saying let's go back from Marx to Hegel. So this is one aspect. The other aspect connected with it is that now comes the big shock. I will be very short here. And I'm here not alone. There are many Hegelians with whom I don't agree, from Robert Brandom to Pippin and so on, who agree here with me. Now I will put the paradox at its purest. You must know it. Marx is in some basic sense more idealist than Hegel. In what sense? Yes, Hegel describes history in a very teleological way. He even has this vulgar evolutionism, like it began for Hegel, he is here, a typical Eurocentric racist. Africa is zero level, they're not even purely human. Humanity begins with China, where only one is free, or India, then in Persia, Manichaeism, and so on. Some are free, and in ancient Greece, with Christianity, all are free, but this is limited to religious sphere and in modern Western Europe, all are free. Do you know what is happening now? Did we already talk about this? I like this idea, although I think with Hegel it's more complicated, because you know who were, I think we already talked about it, I'm sorry if I repeat myself, you know who were the first American Hegelians? St. Louis School. A couple of German high school professors from Germany who even established the first Hegelian journal there in St. Louis around 1850-55. They tried to think further than Hegel. They said since Hegel came a couple of decades earlier, he thought England, France, Germany, that's it, the top. But then the spirit moved further west to United States. First, it was the primitive level New York, and then for them it was St. Louis. And their end was a total historical accident that they detected the right movement, but Chicago took over St. Louis, you know. And then do you know that you have then some Californian Hegelians who made a step further and said, no, you know, when now California is kind of a losing value, it's no longer such an ideal of postmodern society. They said, no, let's go to the end. It's Western of the United States. That's the top. True postmodern society. Like if Baudrillard were to say the ultimate Hegelian place is California. But then already in the 60s, it was Kojève who proposed as an ideal after its economic rise in 1960s, Japan. That Japan is a truly post-historical society where, you know, it's no longer even obsessed with economic wealth. It's more this enjoying everyday rituals, nice manners, and so on. And then, I love them. There are some of my friends in China today. They said, no, to be truly Hegelian, you have to make a full circle. We are back to China, where it all began. That only this. So why I mentioned this, sorry for the loss of time, because of a very precise reason.
Okay.
Because I think this entire logic is false. Yes, Hegel proposes a teleological model, but he makes it very clear that this model is not simply universal. This is how things appear to us from our standpoint. Hegel would have totally prohibited, not would have, he does prohibit it, what Marx does, any teleological speculations about the future. You remember the lines that I always quote from Hegel's introduction or forward, I always forget, to Philosophy of Right, where he said a science, philosophical science, can only grasp social formation insofar as this formation has already reached its peak and began to decay, and we cannot go into future. So this idea to see yourself as a moment in the process towards a higher level, the process which is still ongoing, this is for Hegel too much idealism. Hegel would have said precisely, Marx thinks that he can locate ourselves in a teleological line, moving not with necessity, it's open to catastrophe, but nonetheless towards socialism, communism, and so on. So I think that this is where we need to return to Hegel. He is teleologist, but he, now I will use a very precise term, he dislocates teleology itself. It's this would be a proper Hegelian way to say it, and Marx would agree with him here. It's not just that history progresses in ancient China or this primitive, so-called primitive Oriental absolutist country. Only one was free. Then a couple of people are free. Then now, formally, of course, all are free, and so on and so on. No, Hegel would have put it in a different way. You cannot say that in historical progress we are more and more approaching a certain notion. No, it's that this notion itself gets redefined. And I think precisely that's why Hegel would not have dismissed all these issues of LGBT plus and so on as irrelevant. He would have said, you see, that's historical progress where we are not getting, it may appear, approaching a more just egalitarian society, but the very content of freedom, justice, equality is changing historically. If you take into account LGBT plus and so on, a whole new sphere of egalitarian freedom emerges. And here already we get socialism, because again, the break of socialism from classical liberalism is not, totalitarian organization of economy. It's, yes, we are for equality, but to be actually equal, certain economic and social conditions must be met. We know today what they are. Free or accessible to all, healthcare, education, and all that. So this is what Hegel means when he says that with historical development, the notion itself is caught into this development. We are now not more free than ancient Greeks. We understand freedom in a different way. So here I think Hegel is to be reactualized. I think we have to renounce this too simplistic, maybe Marxist belief in historical teleology that we are approaching and so on. I don't know. I am more of a Walter Benjamin pessimist, which is neither Hegel nor Marx. That if anything, the spontaneous not in the sense of mechanic, but in the sense of history, our history led to itself, to its own dynamic, is approaching some apocalyptic endpoint. And precisely, we no longer can afford to trust history. We have to act against.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.